All right, I would like to call the Port Orchard City Council Finance Committee of February 15th to order. And I think there's two items that we need to deal with that are not on the agenda. First off, we need to decide on the chair of this committee. And I think the other piece of business that we need to deal with is whether or not we're comfortable with the scheduling. I think it's like the third Tuesday of the month, if that fits with everyone.
Yeah, I love this date and time, if that's okay for everyone else. That would be my vote.
I'm good.
It works for me, yeah.
Other committees want this slot if you give it up.
We're not giving it up.
Sounds like it's unanimous, so.
Okay. And then how about the first one? How do you want to handle that, Mayor?
Somebody needs to make a nomination that's a committee member.
Yeah, I nominate John.
I'm fine with that if he wants to do it again.
I'm fine with it. You guys are.
It's unanimous.
So clarification, what Tuesdays at 5 are you?
Work study Tuesdays, every work study, 5 p.m.
Yeah, that's where it used to be. So utility is the second Tuesday, finance is the third Tuesday, and transportation is the fourth Tuesday.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay,
Great.
I think we've dealt with that. So let's move on then to the sales tax report.
Great.
Noah?
Thank you, Chair. I'll pull this over. So jumping right back into 2022, we had a great month in January. We recorded $543,000 of sales tax revenue, which was a $40,000 difference over our 2021. So we experienced an 8% growth over 2021. And again, when we compare this to the budget, it's going to be a little bit skewed because this is the you'll see what we had here as our early 22 budget is $5,340,000. So I'm guessing that the figures for this year when we compare to budget are going to not tell a great story, but it's always important to share it. So 33% over our budgeted value for January. But I think the real value is really 8% growth over 2021 actuals. So when compared to our overall buy-in budget,
Noah, that it won't tell a good story. I mean, it's going to be, we should be blowing it out of the water.
yes, that's what I would expect.
So it is a good story. Over budget.
Yes,
They're both good
Yes.
stories, way over budget
Yes.
and way over a record year.
Yeah.
true.
This is one of those categories that you like to be over budget in.
Yeah.
That is all true. Scrolling down to REIT, again, another great month in January for REIT. We recorded $82,000 of revenue. Again, $8,000 more than 2021 with real growth of 12%. And we are currently over our budget by about 161% for January. So starting off with January really strong for both sales tax and REIT revenues.
Incredible.
Yeah, it's good news.
And so I just sent out today the monthly fund balance reports for January as well as December. Again, as we kind of cross fiscal years, we're trying to close out December, and we are actually required to keep December open through the first 20 days of January. So we don't get that report out to you until about this time. So you guys all should have the December report, which actually reflects the full year, and now our January report that reflects just 2022. So out of the 2022 report, we again look at the current fund balances as of the end of January. Again, all healthy funds. Our current expense is very healthy at $10.5 million, roughly $10.4 million. Our street fund, we've slowly added to that with a number of transfers and contributions to that fund. So we expect there to be a significant street work done this year for 2022. Our stabilization fund, I wanted to point this out, that because our fund balances in the general fund are so healthy, I went ahead and made that full year contribution to the stabilization fund in this month of January. So you can see the $360,000 there. So we have fully contributed now to our stabilization fund for the biennium.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, and we continue to have great healthy balances. So all real good news there. I want to point out the Criminal Justice Fund. Again, this also has a very healthy balance of almost $600,000. We'll talk a little bit about a budget amendment that I'm proposing being paid for out of this fund. That's why I wanted to call it out right here, just to show that it is very healthy and it can absorb the budget adjustment. The other couple of funds I wanted to point out are our water and sewer capital funds. We had great revenues with CFCs last year, both on the water side as well as the sewer side. So we are really starting to accumulate some fund balances there, which is fabulous as we have some huge projects coming up with well 11, 13. And then for Marina Pump Station, we're talking about sewer capital at roughly $3.9 million in that fund.
Water capital's really doing, you know, well, we've got a loan for the Marina Pump Station, and we did get a loan for well 12. We may not need to borrow as much money. Well, we do have some water main projects though that we could pick off with that cash once we get the other Foster figured out. I guess Foster's still the choke point in everything.
Yeah, we still have a number of dominoes that need to kind of fall into place before we can decide how to
having
spend
these
it.
healthy reserves just in case. There's so many unknowns, and I think it's great sitting on cash to be able to, you know, deal with something that's unexpected. I think it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, Mark's guy's hand raised there.
Oh, one is the loan that we received for the 2022 DWSRF was for $8 million. That's for well 11. So well 11 at this point, we
11.
we feel that that's fully funded at this point to get that project complete. But we also have the 4-inch AC line that you'll see on that spreadsheet I just sent you. It's a new project. We've had numerous breaks on that line, one here recently. John probably can realize that.
What street's that on, Mark?
It's on Sroof from Sydney all the way to west or south or something. We've got to replace that water line, and we're going to do an in-house design. And so I'd say that's a project that we need to be doing as soon as we can. So it's going to be a half street kind of improvement with asphalt and then replace that AC main. I think since I've been here, we've had 3 water main breaks on that AC line, and it's turning to mush.
Rough order of magnitude on that?
We don't know yet.
More than $1 million?
No.
Okay. And is it something we're going to do in-house, or is it, what, are we going to design it and then contract it out, or are we going to design it and perform the work ourselves?
No, it's too big for us. We're going to do it as a unit bid like we're doing Lippert, so that the design's really straightforward. It'll be a contract will be issued as a unit bid price contract, and that way we're paying for materials used by tonnage and pipe length and such. So we're going to get on that here very quickly.
Okay, so jumping back again, all healthy balances as we start the new year, and lots of big projects coming up. So that's great.
Yep.
All right.
Okay. Let's
So
move on to budget.
Yeah, the budget amendment. So I sent out a budget amendment. These turned out to be more than I had originally envisioned about a month ago, but they seem timely. So I kind of want to just take care of them all at once. There's the first 2, which I believe the Finance Committee has discussed already and supportive of, is adding the additional patrol officers. And this is really adding, increasing the FTE count in our salary table so that there is enough FTEs, which will allow the chief to recruit new police officers while other officers are retiring out. And last time we talked about this, the Finance Committee was supportive, and I believe we may have even talked about this with the full council, Mayor, if that's what you recall.
Yeah. I know we talked with this committee, and we might have talked with the whole council about it.
Okay. The next one I'm gonna have the mayor actually talk about. This is for a project inspector. This would be a new personnel position.
Let me, before you go
Oh.
there, Mayor, I want to just clarify in my mind, the patrol officers. Is this an addition to the FTE counts that would go essentially up to the point where we have the two that are anticipated to be retiring when they leave, and then it drops back down to where we're at, or is this a permanent 2 FTE addition?
It's not intended as at this time. It'll basically, it'll be through this budget year, which will capture the 2 retirements that we have.
Okay,
And then we'll reevaluate in the next budget process where we need to be from with retirements. The goal would be to project our retirements in the budget process and get out in front of those in the hiring process. And we're late to this, but at least it's a start to have a process like that where we're trying to anticipate hirings, because that training process is so long with the police officers.
right.
So-
No, I understand all that part. I would just, the way that the document was written, it was a little bit confusing in the sense that it kind of looked like we were doing a permanent addition to the FTE count. So, okay, you answered my question. Thank you. Project inspectors.
Yep. Jay, you got your hand raised.
I did. I think it's very similar to John's, except that how, do we get a pretty good retirement forecast? In other words, that people will give us, hey, I'm planning on leaving this year so far. I mean,
Yeah.
the better, okay,
Yeah.
good. Okay. Yeah. Because I'm fully supportive of the pipeline concept. So we get people in. So thank you, Mayor.
Doesn't always, something changes in somebody's life and they move, or what
Right,
we get the one-offs, but for the
Yeah.
most part,
Yeah.
our officers are pretty good about telling us within 3 to 6 months when they're going to
That's what I'm
leave.
saying. Okay, thank you.
So this next one, it started out with me panicking when we thought Chris was going to be out for 6 months, and Chris is mostly back now. His wife is doing better and he's got her back home, but we still have Christian going on family leave. And it just pointed out a glaring weakness to me that we don't have a bench at all. And we're barely keeping up. And when we dug into this, we found that this is actually, my idea wasn't new out there, that Kitsap County right now is trying to hire 2 of these positions. Bainbridge Island's trying to hire one, and Port Townsend's currently hiring one, and many more in the Puget Sound region. But what this inspector will allow us to do is take a number of things off of all of our engineering staff's plates. Darren, who isn't an engineer, is our inspector currently, but he's supposed to be doing inspections half the time. And he's supposed to be doing our GIS work the other half of the time. He hasn't touched GIS in ages. And we need to get back on, getting the documentation and our system plans into our GIS database. We hired Kristen, and he's actually back, he's doing backing up on inspection work. And we would like him to be doing in-house design work. We've got Ian doing nothing but the development projects. And then we've got Chris, that we need him to be doing more in the transportation realm. There's plenty of needs there, in particular with us trying to do a lot of our in-house paving projects and stuff. So this position will take a little bit off of about 4 different people's plates and allow us to manage our capital projects a little better and our inspection work. And we would pay this position like an entry-level engineer. I'm hopeful that we can attract somebody at that level. So Jay, you got your hand raised?
I need to take it down. Sorry.
Okay, raised from last time. So in a nutshell, that's it. We need to free up our people a bit to do, there's things we're not getting to because development is running so hot and fast. And I don't see that slowing down. And we have a bunch of our own capital projects, and we really need someone to manage the inspection aspect of most of this and free up our folks to be able to do some of the other things that they're just simply not getting to.
Yeah, and that's the part that I was going to add, Mayor, is that we're looking for somebody that has materials background, inspection, but also federal, state, Davis-Bacon, Buy America, all the things that the Marina Pump Station or the Well 11 or these other projects that are, and again, that sheet I sent you that you said was granular, we've got a lot of capital projects that are rocking and rolling or just getting ready to take off. The City Hall building, we've got a lot of stuff that we just don't have the capacity right now to manage. So on top of just reshuffling the deck chairs.
John, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we've been talking about this for months, right? As our business volumes are increasing so much, our revenues are increasing, it is entirely appropriate to flex in this direction. And I'm totally supportive of the plans that you guys are putting forward. We have to react to the demand and not be worried about what may happen 3 or 4 years down the road.
Quick question for you, Rob. You indicated that we would be paying these as entry level engineers. Have you looked at what these other jurisdictions are offering? Will we be competitive with them?
Yes, we believe so. The other jurisdictions haven't filled their positions either. And Mark's setting a pretty high bar, as he should, but we may have to reevaluate this after we've got it on the street for a little while, and if we're not getting what we want. But this is our desire, and this is not hire another engineer, but to hire a seasoned inspector, which would be about the same salary as an entry-level engineer.
Like Sean, I'm all for it. I don't have any objections to it. Jay, do you have any issues?
No, I'm sorry about the dog and back. No, I'm fully supportive of it. And I think that Sean's absolutely right. We need to be looking at, up to the out years, and what happens then we'll adjust as needed on FTEs.
All right. So will that be included in this budget amendment? No,
Yeah, so I appreciate that question. So thus far, I have not included it because we had not had a chance to discuss it.
Okay.
And so if the finance committee is supportive, and it sounds like you guys are, again, we'll talk about the budget amendment tonight at study session. So I guess I'd look to you guys to support that with the full council, let that discussion take place. And assuming that the full council is supportive, we would include that in next week's budget amendment to increase the FTE to allow for this position.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Other than I'm going to have to rely on Sean or Jay, one of you two, to take the lead. I'm going to have to miss the study session later tonight. So
I'm happy to speak up and let the full council know about our discussion this evening.
yeah, the committee is unanimously in support of it. So, all right,
Yep.
Thank you.
Great. Okay. So the next couple things, I'm going to try to keep us on time here. So I have proposed a budget amendment for our Bay Street Pedestrian Path REIT project. We had already approved the contract for these right-of-way services. We had thought when we approved that contract that we would be able to time the purchase of these right-of-way property with the budget amendment. And so we thought we were going to do that in late 2021, but things just didn't move. And so we've exhausted all our revenue sources for the project, for that contract. And so this amendment would provide the funding needed for that contract. And then we'll also need to do a budget amendment in the near future once we have entered into contracts for the purchases themselves, and we'll do another budget amendment at that time. Any questions on this? And then the proposal is for it to come from REIT. Again, we've talked about this in the past, and we've actually allocated in our REIT spreadsheet as an obligation for this project for this very specific purpose. So it's kind of just doing some cleanup of stuff we've already talked about and providing the funding.
We've talked about this before, so I think it's okay.
Yeah, and actually funded the contract. We just didn't give it the revenue.
Correct. Yep.
Right.
And the next one, again, is another cleanup item. Very similarly, I thought that we would be moving towards a purchase of some stormwater property. We had already done the appraisal for it, so that's been hanging out there. And it just seems time to true up that appraisal cost, since it did not have a revenue source at the time. I thought I was going to be able to wrap into a single amendment at the end of 21. So it's a small $5,200 revenue addition for that project and expenditure authority for the appraisal. Again, with the expectation that perhaps later in the year, we'll be able to close in on the purchase of that stormwater property acquisition. The ARPA money. Oh, yeah, any questions on that? Nope.
Nope.
Okay, so ARPA, we did talk about this last meeting, and I think the mayor talked about it with the full council, that originally when we had accepted the ARPA funds and we kind of walked down the mid-year review, we were thinking we would use these for some water infrastructure projects, specifically the McCormick Woods intertie, and then well 11, I think, or maybe it was 13. And so we had allocated, yeah, and we had allocated funds to do that. What we've learned over the last couple months is that McCormick Woods intertie became a lot more expensive than we originally envisioned, as well as did the Marina Pump Station. And so I believe we talked about this, and it makes a lot more sense to focus all that funding towards one project, so we ensure we have it fully funded. And so we targeted the Marina Pump Station as it moves from a $13 million project to a $15 million project. So we would propose using the full $2.8 million of ARPA money for that project to cover the gap as we go forward. So this amendment would simply reallocate those water infrastructure monies for the Marina Pump Station, and also increase it for what we've already received. And then once we receive our second tranche of dollars, we would have to reappropriate that and rebudget that for the Marina Pump Station.
So your document indicates that you're going to transfer 1.4.
Correct. Yep. The 1.4 is what we have received in 2021 already. Okay. So that's the full allocation for 21 that would push now. And then once we receive our next allocation, which I think we receive in June or July, then I'd probably bring something back in the fall and say, here's the other tranche of monies. That's
why I was trying to add the two numbers that you had said was not quite what we're transferring. So,
right. Yeah.
Be the second installment to make up the difference.
Remember, we've got, we're seeing some significant increases in the Marina Pump Station. And when we just recently looked at fund balances, it would be difficult for the sewer utility to make that up. And then when we found out that the intertie was going to cost a lot more than we anticipated, that's why we're asking to pivot and make sure we get, deliver on this very significant, now $15 million project. And then we'll circle back on the other project, after we get this one buttoned up.
Right. Now you shared that at least with this committee and not the full council before. So
yeah, and the ARPA dollars have time limits on them, so we want to make sure we spend those monies first. Again, they were a grant, so quote free money. We want to spend those monies first, and then we can circle back on other projects with our local dollars.
In that contract, Amendment 6 that's associated with this is on the agenda for the 22nd of February.
Okay. Criminal justice, police helmets.
So the police department is in need of some new equipment, some helmets. And so the chief and I discussed this, and he was going to go purchase the helmets out of the general fund initially. And then someone reminded me that we could use our Fund 103 for those expenses. And that's why I paused on the criminal justice fund when we began this conversation, to show you there's $600,000 of fund balance in that account, and it's trending much greater than we had originally budgeted. So there's plenty of money there to use for equipment, and this would be a great use for that. So we rely on that fund rather than the general fund. I think it just makes more sense. And now this last amendment is one we should have caught when we did the mid-year review. When we developed the original budget for the biennium, the Transportation Streets Operations Fund 002 needed additional funding, and we had funding in our Street Capital Fund 304. So originally we thought, okay, we'll allocate some of these dollars in fund balance over to 002 to solidify the street preservation work and pavement management work. As we've had such a great year in the general fund, in the mid-year review, we actually unbudgeted that transfer for 2021 and had the general fund actually make that transfer and contribution. And so this is the same exact approach. It's just for 2022. And the dollars we were talking here is $239,000 that would no longer be coming from our street capital transportation fund, but would be an additional contribution from our general fund to our streets operations fund. And that does two things. A, it helps, keep the street capital project fund healthier with stronger fund balances. We do know we have some major street projects coming for the capital fund. So that kind of makes it nicer there. And then it also is nice because it allows some of the general fund dollar, the surplus that we've gathered in sales tax, to go to the 002 fund for more pavement preservation work. So I just want to put that out there. The council was supportive of this when we did the mid-year review. Yeah, I think it makes sense for those reasons.
You're not going to get any argument out of me. Street preservation, it's worth it.
Nope, we're good.
Okay.
Great. Moving on, the mayor would like to talk about the community events center.
Okay, we've got a couple of items here. One of them is in the packet, and it is that
Do you want me to pull it up?
you could, it's for engineering services. The bank sits right on the shoreline and there's a seawall in front of the bank. As you know, we're going to build, when the community center is built, when we tear the bank building down, we're going to step back, and we need to ensure that when we take the bank building off the top of that seawall, that the first winter storm isn't going to topple the seawall and compromise the foundation of the community center. So engineers need to go into there's a crawl space. There's I guess a slab underneath the bank building from the old grocery store. It is a crawl space, and the bank building's built on top of that. And we just need to go in and evaluate, have engineers evaluate the structural integrity of that seawall. We intend long-term to do shoreline restoration and take this out, but in the short run, we want to be able to just put basically an observation deck on top of this, provided that the seawall is still is structurally sound. So the cost to do that is $25,000, $23,000, almost $23,400 to have an engineering firm go in and evaluate the seawall. So any questions about that? And then I've got another. So when Nick and I threw spaghetti at the wall and came up with costs for designing a community center, neither one of us had any experience at doing that, and we've done pretty well. We're actually, Nick's doing exceptionally well at this, but we are at the next. You can stop on that one. This one isn't on there, Noah. We are negotiated a scope for the next phase of the design development aspect of the building now, and Nick's negotiated that scope with Rice Fergus Miller. It was one of the elements in the ILA with the Public Facilities District was that we would design and build actually the shoreline restoration. And it's very apparent that there isn't enough money for the shoreline restoration in this, and that we need to focus the resources that we got from the Public Facilities District on the building. And in the hierarchy of the additional things that need to happen, at least in my opinion, the plaza between the bank and because we're going to pursue grants for the plaza, the street, and the shoreline. But we can't, they all have matches, and they all take staff time to manage projects and grants. So in the hierarchy of things, I believe that we've got to have a functional plaza between the bank and the community center. Secondly, we've got to have a street that doesn't have 18-inch curbs, because we built the buildings for seal rise and the street isn't there. And we want to do the shoreline, but of the three, that's probably the thing that could wait if we don't have, a mountain of money to take care of it. So I talked to Russ Shiplet today, who the executive director at the Public Facilities District, about this. And I said, we can go about this two ways. I've promised your board that I wouldn't ask for any more money, but if you were willing to give me more money for a design of the shoreline, we definitely take it. And I said, or we need to modify the ILA to exclude the shoreline restoration, and we'll do it at a later date as a city project. And Russ said to me, this is our most important project, and I can't guarantee the board will say no, but we're having record revenue. Imagine that, just like us. And he said, I recommend that you figure out a scope and come ask our board for the additional money. And it's probably $200,000 or $300,000. But so that's the game plan. Is Nick is going to negotiate a scope with Rice Fergus, and we're going to ask. But in the event that we get turned down, I just want keeping you guys informed that we're likely going to have to modify the ILA if we get turned down for the additional money, and find city resources at a later date to design that shoreline restoration.
Sounds like the proper steps forward.
Okay, that's what I know about that.
Thank you. Okay, utility tax discussion. It's going to be interesting.
Actually, sorry, Chair, before we move that one, Rob, did you want to talk about the affordable housing
Yeah.
agreements?
I'm looking at an old agenda.
Yeah, sorry.
So that's right. We've got the two contracts coming forward next week, one for Homes of Compassion. And I just want to, on that one, there's a deviation in our standard contract. We require to be listed on their insurance, their automobile insurance. They don't have automobiles. Their staff go to Costco or to the store in their personal car. And so they don't have any automobile coverage to add us for a rider. So they're asking that we waive that requirement. Charlie has told me there's minimal risk, and I just informing you before I bring that contract forward with striking that from our standard contract. So that's that one on Homes of Compassion. On the Housing Kits app, there was we just wrapped this up today, and I'm hopeful we'll make the packet. There was a question whether or not we were going to give them this money up front in one lump sum, or they were going to seek reimbursement. They're going to seek reimbursement. So they're going to do the work and get reimbursed from us. The second piece of that is what would be an appropriate administration fee, because they're going to need to pay their staff. Their staff doesn't do the actual work. They hire contractors. So they have an administrative cost. And Dean and I talked about there'll be an actual number that'll be justified, but we wanted to not have a open checkbook on it. So it'll be up to 10% of the contract amount for their administration fee. So just wanted to share that with you also.
Seems reasonable.
And I believe the goal is, Mayor, to bring both those contracts to next Tuesday's council meeting.
Yep.
Okay.
That is correct.
Okay.
Okay. So now we can move on to the utility tax discussion, and Nick is going to lead this. Nick, do you want me to give you control?
Yeah, if I can share my
Yeah.
screen,
ahead,
that's,
give
I'm
it a
just gonna
try.
share the memo. So, committee members, I started talking to Noah about this issue a couple of months ago, because it came to my attention that both West Sound residents in the West Sound Utility District area and the Bremerton Water Service area are not paying the same utility tax rate as residents of the city. There's when we annexed those areas, we did not amend our ordinance for the water, sewer, and stormwater utility tax to extend into those areas, although stormwater is charged to everybody who receives a city utility bill. So I started talking about this issue with Noah, and at the same time, the Transportation Committee has been wrestling with how to pay for various improvements. And We are currently seeking a scope of work from our on-call consultant because we're looking at outlining how we would go about putting together some sort of voter approved measure to fund projects like Bethel and actually get some of these bigger projects done that are certainly bigger than any of our regularly available grant funding sources. And so even in talking to the mayor and talking about utility taxes, it was clear that this is something that we haven't talked about a lot over the years. And as you know, in the first table here, table 1, you can see the last time that we touched a lot of these things, with the exception of natural gas, which we adjusted in 2017 to bring it on par with our electrical utility tax rate. We really, this is not something that we've discussed often, and it really hasn't been part of our overall revenue discussions for the city. And so I wanted to, number one, outline in this first paragraph sort of what a utility tax is. The city essentially has the ability to charge this tax on electrical, telephone, natural gas, solid waste, water, sewer, stormwater, and cable TV. And for telephone, that also extends to cell phone based service, but not for data plans, only for the number of minutes that you're purchasing as part of your cell phone plan. Some of these taxes are capped at 6%. I believe that the cable TV tax is actually capped such that there's no clear definition, but it shouldn't be out of line with any of your other utilities. But there's actually no limit in state law on solid waste, water, sewer, and stormwater. And so I was pointing out to Noah that I currently pay a significantly higher rate where I live in Tacoma. And I started gathering data on some of the other cities around, which I'll present a little later on. But I wanted to frame this discussion in the context of the transportation funding challenges that the city is currently dealing with. And I pulled our traffic impact study report, which we adopted when we adjusted our traffic impact fees to go to about $5,000 per new home constructed in the city. And I'm going to momentarily share a different screen here. The traffic impact fee report that we adopted earlier in 2021. If you remember, each project had a cost estimate, then it listed the local share, and then it listed growth share. And when you go to the bottom of this table and you add them up, the growth share plus the local share does not cover the full project cost. And that's because the remainder is being funded with grant programs. And so this $67 million amount that is in our traffic impact fee study is the money that we're supposed to be coming up with to fix the local deficiency. And I think some of the thought here is that optimistically we will get more grant money than is anticipated, and that will take a chunk out of this. But there's still a pretty large gap in funding that is supposed to be coming out of local dollars to complete these 20 or so projects that are on our project list. So back to the memo. The other two documents that we've prepared in recent years are the ADA transition plan and the pavement management plan. And so the pavement management plan recommended back in 2016 that we invest $1.45 million annually to keep a pavement management score of 70 and keeping our backlog at 7%. And so it's been a little hit or miss in terms of our investment over the years, but it certainly has not approached the $1.4 million. However, when we do some of these large projects like Tremont, you are essentially replacing a large chunk of pavement in the city. And so to some extent that helps deal with your ongoing pavement management. But regardless, I think that our annual investment is below what is recommended. Likewise, the ADA transition plan is also currently well below the 1.5 million that is recommended annually. I think there's a line item in the 6-year street plan for about $150,000 per year. So in thinking about how we set our utility tax rates, if we chose to look at this tool, I was just trying to define kind of what are some of the needs and the gaps that we currently have in the city. So I pulled data from a number of other cities, and in some cases, first of all, I pulled the rate data, and I think it's really interesting to look at how the rates vary. And I underlined and highlighted the Shelton refuse rate, which is currently 41% on their refuse service. Likewise, Paulsbo is at 12% for water, sewer, and stormwater. Bremerton's at 15 and 20% for water, sewer, and stormwater. Port Townsend's at 22%, and they actually have a very interesting structure in that in their code, they have defined how that money is appropriated. And so they're putting 10% into a public safety fund, and they're putting another 10% into a transportation project fund. And then some of the tax sunsets in a few years once they pay off one of their capital projects that they're building. But anyway, it's an interesting approach where they're trying to, I guess, assure their voters of how the money is being used. The other thing that I did was I actually looked at just gross utility tax revenues, and I looked at those on a per capita basis and compared those revenues to our neighbors. And I think what that shows is that comparatively, residents of Port Orchard are paying less per capita than most of our neighbors, with the exception of Gig Harbor and Bainbridge Island, though Bainbridge Island is maybe a bad example because I think they get a lot of their utilities taxes in the form of franchise fees, and they aren't specifically listed as a revenue in their budget in the same way that we list our utility taxes. So I'm not sure that that's a great comparison. But in thinking about the cities that are lower sort of than the average of our neighbors, Gig Harbor has much higher property assessed valuation and higher sales tax revenues. And so I did provide, comparable per capita sales tax revenue based on what they budgeted. I didn't have year-end actuals for most of these cities. And in some cases, I was only able to find a year-end number for 2020. And likewise, I pulled the same information for property tax revenue per capita to show that, Port Orchard, per capita, our cost of living in terms of these three taxes that are paid is significantly lower than our neighbors. And so I just wanted to start a conversation with the city council because, as we mentioned, we are exploring the possibility of a ballot measure that would add, what is it, Mayor, 0.1% sales tax for transportation. Yeah. And one of the benefits of that tool is that residents from outside the city as well as residents inside the city are paying that, whereas the utility tax is solely paid by city residents. But I think it's important for the city council to understand that this is the one revenue source that you have control over and are able to set and adjust, by vote of the city council, as opposed to having to go to the voters or being subject to the 1% cap on property tax, et cetera. And so to the extent that you have the power to make some of these projects happen outside of the share that can be paid for by development, this is something that's available to you, whether it's to fund transportation projects, or even if we decided that we needed to find some revenue to pay our share of the community event center project if we don't get everything we need from the legislature or from other sources. And so I ran a couple of alternatives, and basically the first thing I looked at was what happens if we just bring utility taxes for water and sewer in the West Sound service area and in the city of Bremerton up to 5%. And it's a pretty small amount. It generates about $76,000 in annual revenue to the city. And keep in mind, I know what an average residential bill is in those areas. In West Sound, I have no idea what Walmart and Fred Meyer are pulling without going and actually looking at these individual bills. So I think this is probably a conservative estimate because I don't know enough about the commercial customers and what they're paying.
And as that last sentence says, it's really about equity, all of all of our citizens paying the same amount of tax.
Right.
We need to have that tax equitably applied in the city.
Right. And we've talked about that as a first step over the last year, having everyone within the city pay that fair tax. So that particular part of this conversation we've had over the last year.
Right. So then what I did once I figured out what each percent of utility tax is worth in the city, I started extrapolating what would happen if we set the water, sewer, storm refuse rates to 6%, to 8%, to 10%, to 12%, just to give council an idea of, what is the potential of this tool to generate revenue, either to pay debt on a project if we decided we wanted to tackle something big like the Bethel corridor or some of the Sedgwick improvements near Lowe's, or if we had to pay for the community event center. And so this gives you an idea based on our current population of what this sort of adjustment would do. And the important thing is that, and economic development saw a population forecast that I gave on yesterday morning's meeting. But if you look at what these revenues are now versus what they're going to be in the future, as more ratepayers come into the city, these numbers are potentially double what they are here in a pretty short order of time. And I think imposing this sort of thing, if you are going to go down this road, is certainly easier to do before you have people moving into the city and then they see their bills change, as opposed to after they've moved into the city. This is a much harder thing to do. So I'm merely presenting information at this point in time. I don't have a specific recommendation. But the last piece of information I provided is what do each of these do to the average person's bill? And I just pulled random bills for people who don't have irrigated lawns and just said, for the Bremerton customer going to 6%, what does this cost per month? The Port Orchard customer, and then the West Sound customer at these various alternatives.
John?
So I was just trying to stimulate discussion, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have if you have them.
Just curious, scroll back up just a little bit to that last chart right there. So why the variances, we go from 6 to 8%, 8 to 10, and 10 to 12. Why is there a variance in actual dollars, right? So from 6 to 8, we're growing about $260,000, but then we go 8 to 10 and it's growing over $300,000 in the same 10 to 12. Is there a explanation for that? I would think it would be the same as we increase 2%.
Well, I think that the 6% includes adding the West Sound and Bremerton customers for that first 5 that they're not currently paying. And so that first step is a little bit different, but I can open the spreadsheet and share that with you.
I'm just looking at the difference between 6 to 8, 8 to 10, and 10 to 12. You would think those 2% jumps would be.
Yeah, and Nick, is it I guess, is it actually additional revenue off the prior scenario, or is it additional revenue off the base scenario?
It's additional revenue off the base scenario.
Yeah,
which is
so
our current rates.
right.
So this is the difference between what we currently collect in table 2 above versus what we would collect if we versus how much additional revenue we collect if we change these rates to these percentages.
Yeah, so it looks like the delta is about 200,000 in that ballpark. I'm just eyeballing it here.
Not
as we
from
step up.
8 to 10 and 10 to 12. You're up.
10 to 12 isn't.
You're
It's 300 and
300 something. So it looks the same between 8 and 10 and 10 and 12, but not the same between 6 and 8.
Yeah.
I'd have to go back and check the spreadsheet. It's possible there's a something disconnected there.
This is why Nick is the development director, not the finance director.
No, it's all good. No, I'm not being critical.
It's all right. I think the information is right, but let me just go pull open my spreadsheet and I'll take a look at it. But while I'm doing that, any other questions or thoughts?
I think the recommendation is we'd like to move forward with placing the tax on the Bremerton customers and the West Sound utility customers that reside within the city, so that we have an equitable tax structure. The rest of this is really informational as we try to look for ways to fund these big ticket items. This is could be one of the tools we may, or I think we owe it to the voters to, if we're going to do something like this, why do we need to do this, and what is it going to pay for?
Yeah, my only comment there is.
Well, I was going to say I got a couple comments on this, but Jay has his hand up. So, Jay.
Thank you. No, I was going to say I'm all in favor of the equity right out the bat, and I think the mayor covered it pretty well from my perspective about if we go out with any further, then we really need to explain why and what's it going to pay for and make sure it pays for it. Because I've seen in other areas of the school district where they just get hammered, even with things that come up out of their control and can't complete a project. So equity, yes. Other, need more information. Thank you.
Well, I would agree with Jay on the equity portion. I've been questioning that for quite a while, but I guess, my only hesitation or question, I guess, on these utility rates would be coupled with two things. One, are we seriously talking about doing a 1/10? And how would that fit in the total equation? And secondly, I guess kind of like some of these others, I would personally like to see this increase get dedicated to our preservation and maintenance of our streets.
Mm.
I mean, if that's the intent, then I think we need to do, to the extent that we can, make sure that this money is going where it was intended to go.
I think we could pass a resolution that dedicates, whatever, and maybe it's even, something we increase and another portion of this particular tax. And John, to your other question about the 1/10, yeah, I'm give you a sneak preview of the, one of the things that's on the retreat agenda. I think it's time to have I hope we're ready for either a Parks and Recs levy to properly fund our parks, or a property tax measure to pay for roads. I don't believe we should go to the voters with both issues at one time. And so I want to have a discussion with the council on which one first, and develop a plan and go out to the voters and see if we can pass that. And if we're successful with that, then develop a plan, and a couple of years later, go out to the voters and ask again, if after we've delivered on the first one. So that's one of the retreat topics.
Well, I would look forward to that discussion, because I think we need to look at it in its, entirety, and not piecemeal it with a little bit here and a little bit there. And so.
Would you like this discussion at the utility, or at the retreat too?
I think it would be appropriate myself.
Okay,
Absolutely.
I will add it.
Sean, you have your hand up.
And Sean, I have an answer for you on your previous question. The reason that it's different is that refuse is already at 6%. And so water, sewer, and storm are all increasing, but refuse is already capped and is not being adjusted until you get to 8%. And so the rate of increase is less.
Perfect. Thank you, Nick. You are a finance whiz.
Oh, don't encourage him.
The comment I was going to make is right and I love the fact we're going to talk about this at the retreat. We just can't go and tackle all this at once. And but I just want to make sure that as we look at these things, that we have the human resources to actually put these dollars to work, that we're just not banking this stuff for years to come. And so please bring a staffing model that allows us to deploy the funds, not just kind of a wish list.
Good point. Good point.
Here.
Okay.
The other thought that I don't think has been mentioned, but obviously we're moving into water and sewer rate discussions. And so obviously if the water and sewer rates change, then the utility tax revenue also changes with it. And so there's, I don't know if you do those at the same time, if you do one before the other, but that's certainly something that should be considered as well.
Should weigh into our decision too. If we've added so many new customers, and our capital program's in pretty good shape. I'm hopeful that we're not going to be asking for large rate increases, but if that need exists, then it'd be tough to ask for a 10% increase to your rate and then add 5% in taxes onto it too.
Right. And which leads us to the next thing with parks impact fees. We just need to make sure that we're understanding the sum of all parts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. On the equity issue, if we were to impose our utility tax on the Pavement citizens and West Sound Utility, I'm assuming that tax would be on top of what those various jurisdictions already charge.
That's correct. And West Sound Utility District isn't able to levy a utility tax. Bremerton is, and they do charge a utility tax to our customers, and there's nothing we can do to stop them from doing that. But Mark and I have been discussing a draft franchise agreement for Bremerton. And one of the things that we're suggesting, Bremerton actually charges our customers 150% of their base rate because they're outside of the city of Bremerton. And so we were considering trying to negotiate that they would not charge our citizens more than a resident of Bremerton. And the reason is that usually you charge people outside of your city more because it's an incentive to annex. But in this case, Bremerton can't annex areas of Port Orchard. And so it's something we can certainly ask for in the franchise agreement, since we don't currently have a franchise agreement with Bremerton. So that would at least soften the blow for those Bremerton customers, because even if their utility tax for Port Orchard goes up to 6%, their rate is going to go down.
That'd be nice. Okay.
So if we're ready to move on, Nick, you also have the next one, which is the parking factor fees.
Yes. So, and my dogs are about to go bananas because I just heard the garage door open. And that's my wife getting home from work. So I may mute myself here temporarily, but I'll share the screen, and Mayor, if I have to stop, please take over. The parks plan that we just adopted, if you remember, we made some revisions to the capital improvement program. And so when we originally developed the park impact fee schedule, it was based on a lower capital dollar amount, and it was closer to $2,500 per new home. Under the new impact fee schedule, this fee has gone up to $3,000 per home, provided that we assess 50% of our total capital cost to development projects. And so council is free to adjust this 50% number however they want. So if you wanted to get this back down to $2,500, you could lower it to 40%. If you wanted to increase it more than this, you could. But this is the proposed rate based on 50% of our park capital expansion being funded to new development. And then it's adjusted based on persons per household numbers for various unit types. And I'm actually just now realizing, I'm wondering if I sent the old version to Noah. We actually adjusted the housing products to match what OFM provides, because the persons per household number for a single family house is now 2.84. And the townhouse is down to 2.05. Let me see if I can pull up a different document. And
Well,
feel
Nick's
free to
looking
ask
for-
questions while I'm looking for them.
Yeah, well, Nick's looking for that. Our housing market is on fire and we have so many capital needs. I just don't see that adding $1,500 to this to fund our parks is a deal breaker in this housing market. And I don't think we should be bashful about asking for appropriate fees, because the market is so hot. And if it slows down a development a tiny bit, that might be okay.
Any comments, questions?
No, I don't. That makes sense. I mean, it's just as long as we can show the need, and
Yeah.
it is what it is.
Okay,
Yep.
so I will find the correct fee schedule, and I'm still looking for it, but this can't go forward until March anyway. Maybe I'll bring this back again at our next meeting with the final proposal and a draft of the ordinance for this committee to look at. But I just wanted to make sure that the $3,000 number, which we're targeting for single family homes, feels like it's in the right spot. But if you wanted it to go higher, we can certainly adjust it upward.
Wouldn't be a bad idea just to share maybe some comps like you did on the last slide with where comparative jurisdictions are doing. It's always just good to be able to check and balance that.
Will do.
Remember too, Bainbridge and Paulsbo have Parks and Recs divisions. And so they have a dedicated property tax source. So
Yeah.
they may not be a fair comparison. And so does Gig Harbor. So all of our neighbors have a Parks and Recs levy funding their parks.
But that should be part of the conversation, right? It's
Yeah.
in lieu of.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Still being paid.
Yeah.
Okay,
Great.
anything more?
No, do
Yes.
you have I don't have a number to give you a call on. I wanted to ask you a quick question. What's the
Okay.
best number for you?
Stay on this
If-
call.
Let's let's go ahead and adjourn the meeting, and then you guys can pass numbers around. So if there isn't anything else for the good of the order.
Actually, can I share this parks schedule? I found the correct one. It just took me a minute.
Sure.
So when we adjusted this based on the current OFM persons per household number, the single family rate actually did go up somewhat to 3,300. And actually all units are higher because even these multifamily units have higher persons per household numbers than what the consultant had from our old 2010 census data. So
It's up about 30%.
Yeah, so it is considerably higher than the previous amount. So if we wanted to get back to that 3,000 number, I'd have to lower the 50% to 46 or 47, I think.
And I wouldn't look at it so much as getting back to $2,500 is what's the need? What you know what I mean?
Right.
$100 million was the parks plan. That's the need.
What's the realistic need?
Is we'll fund as much as we can get revenue for.
Yeah, understand.
Well, it goes back to Sean's earlier comment about what do we have staff-wise to be able to handle it all. So
Right.
I got
with $100 million, you're going to
Yeah.
increase staff by about 50. So
Yeah, to leave it in a bank account would be really bad.
No, relevant projects right now that we could spend these dollars on: the pedestrian path construction, so that we're not relying solely on REIT, that it's an eligible use. The plaza and open space for the community center, and
The
all
community
the other
center
things in our
itself.
parks plan. What's that?
The community center itself, I
In
think
the
there's
community
like
center
$4 million
itself.
of park impact fee money that can go into that building. And then McCormick Village Phase 3 is the other big one where we're going to seek a grant from RCO, but we need to have a 50% match.
And I think that's important. As long as we can show that we can deploy the funds, then that's a huge part of that story. Let's just not let them sit in a fund.
Yeah, so there's 4 big ticket items right there that we will need to prioritize.
Yeah. Okay.
all righty. Anything else? If not, meeting's adjourned. And Sean, thank